Hello, everybody. So, here I am back again for my thoughts. As a reminder, I'm Jim. I have a master's degree in social responsibility and sustainability, and my objective is helping to leave a better world for my nieces and nephews to grow up and have families in, and eventually to have grandchildren. Now, today I'm actually going to be using some source documents. Yes. Proof of colleges using communist propaganda. Take Back Our Economy, Ethical Guide for Transforming Our Communities. By J.K. Graham, Jeremy Cameron, and Stephen Healy. Why do we need to take back our economy? Let's see what we have here. This rests on the premise that our economy is the outcome of decisions we make and the actions we take. That's true. Our lives are the result of the decisions and actions that we make. If you step in front of a bus, you get hit. What do we need to live healthy lives materially and psychically? How do we survive well? What do we do with what's left over after we've met our survival needs? How do we distribute surplus? What types of relationships do we have with people and the environment that enable us to survive well? How do we encounter with others? That sounds nice. That doesn't sound communistic. It doesn't sound untoward. Then we come over to, and that's where I failed to highlight the sentence. The message we are getting loud and clear is that we have not paid sufficient attention to these concerns. In fact, we've downright ignored them. Even though we live on a finite planet, we have plundered the Earth's non-renewable energy resources and overused or destroyed renewable ones. Really? Well, that's not untrue. However, there are several points to it that are blatantly untrue. While we have, in fact, plundered non-renewable energy, we keep having the alleged experts, some of whom actually, they have reasonable justification to what they say, that we will eventually run out of fossil fuels. Well, if they're not renewable, you're going to eventually, that if they're not renewable, that means they're finite. If you only have 20 bananas, with every banana you eat, there are fewer bananas to be had later. Overused are renewable resources. And yet, renewable resources like solar and wind make up less than 5% of the energy production in the global market. How have we overused them if we haven't even efficiently begun using them? And contrary to popular opinion, in my opinion, nuclear is one of the best renewable green energy programs. We don't have to do anything to nuclear power plants to initiate the energy. A nuclear power plant functions because the nuclear power rod, in other words, a refined piece of rock. You dig up a rock that has uranium ore in it. You smelt out the uranium. You refine it, and then you have a 1,000-year half-life or better steel metal rod that you stick in a bucket of water. It causes it to boil and then spin turbines. Wow! That just keeps going. And if you don't have a major meltdown like 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, or, God forbid, a earthquake tsunami like Fukushima, then there's no problem. A funny thought to that is that in Iran, there are 20 nuclear reactors in Iran that were built by the U.S. government. One meltdown in 3 Mile Island, U.S., one in Chernobyl, Soviet Union, and one Fukushima, Japan, have been problems. And yet in Iran there are 20? There's an unspecified number that are functioning in the U.S., producing well over a third of our electricity at any given time, that no one talks about. So I would hesitate to concur with these individuals about the overuse of overused or destroyed renewable ones. When, well, how do you destroy it if it's renewable? It's gonna renew. Now, where was this other sentence? Well, it looks like I'm going to miss it, so I have to go from memory. So they point out that private enterprise, comma, which is privileged, makes only a few wealthy at the expense of others. Private enterprise is not privileged. If private enterprise were privileged, then that would mean that only certain select individuals can do it. Now, I believe what they mean is governments privilege people the opportunity to engage in private enterprise. So if you live in the oh-so-civilized world of the imaginary modern society that says, if you want to start a restaurant, first you have to apply for a business license and apply for a health inspection and apply for taxation and possibly, if you want to serve alcohol, for an alcohol license. However, the proliferation of drug cartels and the use of recreational pharmaceuticals, being the polite way of saying crack and heroin, etc., clearly shows that private enterprise is not privileged. Anyone can engage in it if they choose to. Now, any action, as they stated, it is the result of our actions or inactions, our actions and choices. If one chooses to engage in private enterprise in violation of societal laws, is, then one may have the difficulty of running afoul of law enforcement. Now, this does not mean, oh, drug dealers. No, drug dealers are only one aspect. If you open a taco stand without a business license, and someone calls law enforcement and says you're selling tacos without a business license, you're still going to be run afoul of law enforcement. Now, in this case, we're turning to this book, Justice a Reader, by Michael Sandel. And I seriously hope I said his name right. It could be Sandel. I don't know. He is or was a college professor at Harvard. Now, in here, as he's introducing his chapter on Robert Nozick in relation to anarchy, state, and utopia, and distributive justice, Dr. Sandel points out that in a just environment, following inductive definitions would exhaustively cover the subject of justice in holdings. Now remember, justice in holdings. A holding is what you have. So it may be your property, maybe your land, maybe your shirt, or your hat, or your bank account. So a person who acquires a holding in accordance with principle of justice and acquisition is entitled to that holding. So what that's saying is that ethically, you got the stuff. You acquired it without imposing undue hardship on someone else. So walking up, hitting a person on the head, and taking their wallet would not be ethical. A person who acquires a holding in accordance with the principle of justice in transfer from someone entitled to the holding is entitled to the holding. So, in this case, you want a bookshelf. Someone builds a bookshelf. You buy the bookshelf. You have ethically and in a just manner acquired said bookshelf through ethical transfer of property. Therefore, you're entitled to your bookshelf. And third, no one is entitled to a holding except by application of one or two. So either you ethically produced whatever you have, or you ethically acquired through transfer. Maybe you grew the tomato, it's your tomato. You buy the tomato, it's your tomato. No one is entitled to your tomato. So if that's the case, and it would seem logical that it would be, then how does the economy need to be transformed to be more ethical? Well, the argument from my perspective is that government would get the hell out of the way. If I want to sell tacos on a street corner, why do I have to have government approval to sell said tacos? Well, the accepted arguments are, one, to ensure that you are licensed to do business. Okay, why do I need a license to do business? There's no ethical justification to have the government prevent me from selling tacos. Doing business in general. Why do they license it? Because essentially it prevents people from doing unethical things, like selling vodka to kindergartners. That would be unethical. selling tacos for $25 a piece to starving people, or exchanging them for sexual favors in exchange for survival. Once again, unethical. Goes back to the ethics of transfer of holdings. Another accepted argument is that the government will ensure that the person selling the tacos is using healthy meat, clean tools. They're not spreading germs and disease by being dirty, rotten, nasty bastards. Now, in a libertarian perspective, that would be the customer's problem. And if the person selling the tacos was being filthy and disgusting, then they would have no customers, and then they would have no business, because you can't have a business if you don't have customers. Now, in our modern version, our modern American view, we take that to permit the government oversight of these people to ensure whatever this cleanliness standard is. That, how do you argue with that? Can one legitimately argue that there is that people should not be required to sell clean food? I mean, that just makes sense, right? That's like, don't kill people, right? Well, the point of the fact is, if one argues that a restaurant, by virtue of serving food to other people, must be inspected and mandated by the government, then why can your mom fix you breakfast? You can fix breakfast for your friends and family, but you can't sell it to somebody on the street because it might not be clean. That's using a logical argument to argue for or against government oversight of something that, in theory, if people were being ethical, should not exist. I mean, why would you want to serve disease-ridden food to unsuspecting individuals? Okay. Because there are unethical people in the world. So sometimes we may have to make a few concessions to allowing government overreach for everyone's feelings. Well, I personally don't like that, but it's understandable. Similarly, we have business regulation to ensure that we don't have people selling guns to drug dealers. That doesn't seem unreasonable, does it? Well, if that's not unreasonable, why do we consider it unreasonable that a regular, ordinary, law-abiding person would have to be subject to those same rules? I mean, I'm not going to do anything wrong. I'm not going to buy a gun from a drug dealer. I'm not going to sell a gun to a drug dealer. Why would I have to have a business license to sell said firearm? Because there are people who don't care. But that does not justify the ability of unelected bureaucrats to run our lives. Because they think they need to transform our economy and make sure that everyone gets the equality that they think is equal, which just permits people who have no incentive to strive for excellence to get the same thing as those who do strive for excellence. So that has been this week's discussion of ethics and property ownership. with just a little bit of a little bit of indictment of the university level system for indoctrination of communism. But I'm sure they didn't mean to. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you again next week. Y'all have a great, wonderful time.